Dear promoter, dear committee members, dear chair, dear friends and family, and dear colleagues, welcome to the public defense of my thesis entitled Trustworthy Artificial Intelligence for Business Process Analytics. Today, I want to tell you what I have been doing for the past 4 years, and I want to do it in a simple and intuitive way. What better way to What better way to do it with an example scenario where we are all part of? So today we are all members of the Stevens Bank, and our task of today is to only answer this question. Can we predict whether a loan application will be accepted or not? If we are successful, we would increase the operational efficiency because we don't need to drag customers through a very long process. It would lead to cost savings, also time savings for the customer itself. We could even do some targeted marketing because it would allow to target customers that would accept their loan. So overall, this is a very important question to answer. To do this, we actually need to zoom in a bit more. So let's say we have a certain person, Bert, who is applying for a loan. And he comes to our bank, asks for a loan, and typically in our bank, what we do is we take him through our process. And let's say, for instance, we first need to enter his loan in our system. We can do an initial review of his loan application. Then we ask for extra documents that we verify. A credit check can be done. And then, unfortunately, we had to tell him that his loan application is rejected. This doesn't seem like a very long process, but in reality, it's even longer than today. But as I said, I want to keep it a bit simple. Also, keep in mind that besides these activities, there is a lot of external data available as well. But again, we want to keep it simple today, so you don't need to think about other data than these kinds of activities I'm showing you. Not only do we want to do this for birds, we actually want to do this for a lot of people. And we have a lot of processes, so we have a lot of data of a lot of people. And this is actually where machine learning is great at. It's very good at making accurate predictions, but that actually introduces new problems because let's say now Bert comes back to our firm or to our bank and he tells us, well, I'm not very happy. Can you explain to me why my loan will be rejected? He could also ask another question such as, I actually have similar friends with similar backgrounds and their loan got accepted. How is that possible? He could also be even more proactive and say, yeah, what should I have done to prevent this outcome? So these are questions that I will try to solve today and that I have solved throughout my dissertation. And I hope after today, you are able to do that as well. To answer the first question, I will first focus on the first chapter of today, which is explainable artificial intelligence. And to do that, I again want to start with birds. So now I actually took birds' data and put it in a very nice table, and we can use our trained AI model to make a prediction. As you can see, our model is telling us that our loan application will be rejected. Now birds ask, but okay, explain it to me, and we could technically provide him this kind of plots. I don't know for the people in the room, but I'm not sure by just looking at it if this is an actual good explanation. There is a need to know how good your explanation is because otherwise you can just tell anything to any customer and they have no idea whether your explanation is of a good quality. And that's what one of our first contribution was in our first part, is introduce such explainability metrics that actually quantify how interpretable and trustworthy our explanations are. I could go a bit more in depth on how these explainability metrics look like, but what I want you to remember is that a good explanation is both interpretable and faithful, and we actually introduced 4 different metrics to evaluate that. Explainability metrics are good, but obviously you also want more of a solution. So what we also did was we introduced 2 new methods that can actually help you to obtain these good explanations. And then finally, if you are even a bit further than that and you telling that explainability is very important for your use case, we also provide external guidelines that can help you to obtain these explainable and accurate methods. All of this work was published in the following 2 publications, and the first one is the ICPM workshop, and that was extended to the eJOR journal. That leads us to the second part, which is, in my opinion, a bit more difficult to explain. So that's why I will use a lot of figures, because I think figures are easier to understand. So I didn't actually use pictures of cats in my thesis, but this is, I think, a bit easier to follow. If you look to this picture on the left and you look to this picture on the right, for me they look the same. But if you look at the prediction of the model here, it predicts it to be a cat. The same model on the right, for the picture on the right, predicts it to be an ostrich. That is obviously a concern, because how can you trust your model if it makes a different prediction for almost the same image? We tried to do the same thing, but then for a person like birds. So what we did is we used similar insights on how you can add noise to images, and we tried to do it to tabular data as well. So again, to make it a bit more understandable for you, I will show bird again. Here you have this data, the prediction of the AI model, and then basically a little change in the data of birds leads to a different predicted outcome. This obviously is undesired, but what we saw in our preliminary work is that actually most models are more or less robust against these kinds of noise, which is a good thing. What we also saw, which is a bit more worrisome, is that if you now try to use this model and extract explanations, it comes with certain difficulties. This might be a bit more difficult to understand, so I advise you to read the following publication if you want to know more about it. Obviously, every work comes with certain limitations, and one of the limitations we also found out when we generate adversarial examples is that just adding random noise to your data is not always realistic. Here again we have birds with a rejected loan, and let's now also introduce Louise, who was unfortunate to have her loan accepted. Adding random noise to Louise doesn't necessarily lead to a person that can exist in reality. So for instance, this is a person that is, in my opinion, rather unrealistic, and the person we actually want to introduce is, for instance, Louisa. Looks very similar to Louise, almost has a similar name, and also exists in the same representation of accepted loans. So that is also, again, what we try to do in our work. I will first compare Louise and Louisa with each other, so maybe it makes it a bit more understandable for you. These two persons look very similar. They have a similar credit score, they have a different age, similar age, they come from a similar background. Her loan is predicted to be accepted, her loan is predicted to be rejected. It's a very subtle difference, but actually it shows you that our AI model is not robust. You want to have a robust model, but in my case, I'm a researcher. I want to test how robust my model is. So actually, I'm interested in creating examples like Louisa. Although, in theory, you would prefer that Louisa doesn't exist, right? So, how do we do this again with tabular data? Let's now take Louise, or data about Louise. What we do is we generate hundreds similar examples like Louise, and then what we do is we take the one that is closest to Louise. And that's how we could do it with tabular data as well, compared to how we did it with images. Over the years, we became more and more successful in attacking, which is a great thing if you think about adversarially attacking. On the other hand, our attacks became a bit more aggressive because we need to do more changes to be more successful. You might wonder now, why do you do this? What is the use case of this? How could you use this in practice? If you are able to find vulnerabilities in your model, so persons like Louisa, you can actually not only identify them, but you can also mitigate them. So if you know what your problems will be in the future or possible problems in the future, you can try to mitigate them. Most models should be robust to these kinds of theoretical or practical challenges that it might face in deployment. So therefore, we really focused a lot on this robustness parts in the following two publications as well. And then finally, I think a very, very interesting part as well, so please be focused. Again, we will start from birds, because I think that is always the easiest to start if you keep on using the same example. So we have birds, and right now, birds asked us, but how can I change my predicted outcome? Because bird wants to be happy, he wants to have an accepted loan, right? That is what they call a counterfactual. How can we make changes that lead to a different outcome? Then obviously you would see that our model now is predicting our loan to be accepted, right? The question now is, how do we make these kinds of changes to our data? And that brings us to a reformulation of the question. How can we go from a rejected bird to an accepted bird? In the end, we want to make Bert happy, and we want to make sure that his loan application got accepted, right? I'll show it a bit more visually, and then I'll go a bit more over the technical part. But basically what we do is we learn from our data, and we try to go to people that exist in these accepted loans, right? That is an intuitive way to understand how the following algorithm works. And then we have happy birds. How we do it in the background is actually, we just need to minimize this function. This first part is helping us to get from blue to red. The second part is telling us, make sure that this bird still more or less looks like this bird. And the last part is take into account that you're actually using process data and you are in a certain process that needs to be followed. And by minimizing this function, you can get to the other side as little changes as possible while taking into account your underlying process. So, again, what did we contribute to these fields? So, as you can see here, our methods are able to generate more successful and more realistic counterfactuals. With successful here, what I mean is we don't just introduce one possible counterfactual explanation, we introduce 21% more counterfactuals than the benchmark, meaning that we give the end user a lot of different options, right? That is necessary because then the end user can actually choose which counterfactual chains he or she prefers. Second thing is here, what I mentioned with the process constraints. By taking into account these process constraints, we see that our counterfactuals violate less certain constraints that we predefined. I understand that this is a bit more technical, but I want you to remember that this paper tells you more about it. And I think this now brings me to the final part. And this part is actually designed to give you 3 main insights that you should take from today. And first part is actually that if you are able to generate good explanations for your model, you can not only increase trust in AI, but you can actually ensure that there will be a higher adoption rate of AI models in practice. Meaning that if you are able to explain what your model is doing, more people will trust it. Second part is that robustness might sound a bit theoretical if you look at it like here, but if you are able to show that your model is robust, you are more likely to meet certain regulatory or certification standards that will become more and more necessary in a trustworthy AI world. And then finally is what I want to show with this is that I'm not the one saying that counterfactuals are the best, but in the EU AI Act and in the GDPR, they are stating that counterfactuals are one of the most promising methods for human understandable explanations. So that is also one of the reasons why we focus on generating counterfactual explanations for BERT, because they lead to very human understandable explanations. Besides my PhD, which is summarized in the slides, I also tried to contribute to other fields, so I have to thank my co-authors in the room present today as well. And that basically brings me to the final slides. Thank you for your attention.
Okay.